No matter what you call it, glue goo or sprue goo, the idea of dissolving plastic sprue from your kits in liquid cement has been around for a long time. Just take a look at a couple of posts from the FSM Forum, I think one from like 2003 or 2008, and these guys are talking about doing it, and they're saying that they'd heard about it from back in the 60s. One of our forum contributors actually said that he remembers guys back in the 60s dissolving plastic in containers of methyl ethyl ketone, also known as MEK, and keeping that stuff around to use as filler on their models. Not something I don't want that around my house, and you probably don't either. But the idea has been around for a long time, and we're going to show you how to make it and how you can use it. So what you need to make sprue is a receptacle like this glass bottle. You can use also like a metal dish or a ceramic dish, that would work. You're going to need some sprue. Make sure that all of the parts that you want or need for your model are already off of the sprue. You're going to need something to cut the sprue with. Don't use your fine grade side cutters that you're using, you know, for doing real work. Use something that's got some heft to it and that you're not afraid to really crank on. And then you're going to need the liquid cement. And I've found that Tamiya extra thin cement or Tamiya airbrush cleaner are the best for making sprue goo. There is very little difference between the airbrush brush cleaner and the Tamiya extra thin cement. They're both basically 50-50 butyl acetate and acetone. So these work really well. As you might expect, the first thing we want to do is snip up this sprue. The smaller you chunk up this sprue, the quicker the cement, the solvent, is going to melt it. So you can see all of these right down here. And what I'm gonna do is just cut up more of this sprue and get a nice little pile here. So as you can see, I've got my little sprue pellets here already. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna transfer these into the lid for that little jar. Now I wanna talk about that for just a second. I said that you could, you know, use a receptacle, a glass jar would work, or a ceramic bowl. You can use something like this, but if you're not going to be using a lot of sprue goo and you just let whatever is in there sit, what it will do is eventually it will harden. I'll show you something like that at the end of the video. So because I'm not going to be using a lot of this, I'm just going to make up a small amount here. I'm okay with keeping this tin around and continuing to use it as needed. So next up, we're going to take some of this Tamiya airbrush cleaner and we're going to add it to the goo. Well, the pellets, which will eventually be the goo. And what's going to happen here is you're just sort of going to cover it. I say, for me, it's about covering it to just so that the liquid is over or right to the top of the pellets. And that should be the right amount. And then all you can do now is wait for it to work. Make sure you're doing this in a nice, well-ventilated area because this stuff gives off fumes and you do not want to be just standing there huffing essentially what is glue. So make sure you've got a fan or you're doing it outside or in a very well ventilated area. Now, we just wait and watch. Come back in every once in a while, just sort of move things around and see that things are already getting gooey. Gooey, gooey. Oh yeah. So after 40 minutes, we've actually got some nice goo in there. It's not all done, but this cement is going to continue to work. But we've got some nice workable workable goo in this lid here. So let's go ahead and apply it to a gap. So let's say you want a gap filled, and oh, you can kind of, let's see, right down, if you look right down in there, you can see the gap we're going to fill on the bottom there. This old Matchbox kit that we've been using for all sorts of testing purposes. You can see that gap right there. So let's say you've got a gap you want to fill, and you want to use your sprue goo to do it. Take a toothpick and gather up some goo like that, and you can go ahead and dab it right onto that gap. Now, here's the thing about why you would want to do this as opposed to some other solvent or a water-based putty or filler. And that is, you're actually putting plastic in there. That's the big bonus. That would be why guys who do this and have been doing this, they would tell you that's the reason to do it. It's because what you're doing is you're filling a gap on a plastic model with plastic. Now, and this is fair, some of you are going to say, well, why not just take a thin piece of styrene strip and lay that across there, apply some liquid cement, thin cement down along there, just sort of push it in there, and then file that smooth. That's another option. It's basically the same thing without necessarily making the sprue goo, right? But what you want to do here is apply it. It's going to settle into that gap, and then all of that cement, all of that solvent that's in there is going to basically gas out of there, and what you should have then is plastic that fills that gap. You might have to do it a couple of times and then just go ahead and sand it smooth. And as you can see here, I previously applied some sprue goo into this gap here and this gap there, and I just sanded them smooth. And I left this one a little bit rougher than this one just so you guys could see the texture of it. So that is, it's just like having plastic right in there, right in that gap. That's the argument for sprue goo, and that's how you make it. Now, is sprue goo the best filler that you can have? I'm not going there with that, I don't think. I think it is a tool that you can have in your arsenal. If you want to make some up and give it a try, that's good. If you want to make some and have it on hand, that's great too. But I don't think it necessarily replaces your water-based putties, your other solvent-based putties like from Tamiya or elsewhere. And a lot of the auto guys, they really like using Bondo. Bondo feather is really nice, and it can be finished very, very nicely too. So sprue goo, it's just one of those things that you can have at the workbench that could prove useful. Here's one last thing that I want to show you. This was sprue goo that I made about 6 weeks ago. If you put it in a container that has a lot of airspace, what will end up happening is it will harden. So you'll have to, if you're not using a lot of it, you'll have to put some cement back in here and mix it around and let it sit just like you did with the original, what we did here. Let it set, go back and mix it, and then you can, get it going again, but it will harden after a certain point. So if you're gonna put it into a glass receptacle like this that you want to maybe have a lid for, just understand that that's what this receptacle is going to be used for forever until you toss it out. That is how you make sprue goo. That is how you apply sprue goo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.